Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well today on this rainy day here in Pittsburgh. All right, so let's go over the schedule here a little bit. So I think this is what week 8, I think. Yeah, and it is exam week, so you have an exam due tomorrow. So make sure you get that in by I think midnight. Okay, I need to get that in so I can give your midterm grades. Okay. So also chapter 6 review is due next Sunday. All right. So get the exam in and then chapter review on chapter 6. And then we got week 9 coming up here where we're going to chapter 7. We'll talk about agriculture and soil and all that rigmarole. And then we get to week 10, which will do environmental health and toxicity, talk about pollution and all that great stuff. And then to week 11, we'll get into the fresh water. So I just added week 11 stuff. All right. And then you got your chapter assignments and current events all down here. And then after that, I think we got renewable energy, or fossil fuels, renewable energy, cities, and what's the other one? Can't remember the other thing. Toxology or something like that. All right. So we're getting there. We're halfway through the semester. Okay. So don't forget your exam for this Wednesday. All right. So let us get into the chapter. This chapter is about population. Oh my goodness, population. Yeah, and this is one of my favorite websites. If I ever want a quick stat to figure out what's going on in the world, um, it gives me the current population of 7.8 billion people here on planet Earth. I remember when I first started teaching this less than 12 years ago, we didn't even have 7 billion people. We had like 6.8 billion when I started teaching this. So we've already added a billion people since I've been teaching this class. Unbelievable. All right. And you may ask yourself, how do they come up with this number? Okay. Well, a lot of the, you know, developed nations, we got these things called death and birth certificates, so we can count up our population pretty darn easily. But there's some nations that's not as easy in Africa and South America, and some places where they have tribes, and Pakistan has a lot of tribes and things like that. So they kind of do estimates. Their best estimate, they go out to a tribe and just basically ask people. But they've been, society's been documenting how many people are around for I don't know how long. I mean, geez, even in the Bible, that's why Moses or Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem, right, for the census to get counted. Right, so we've been keeping track of our population pretty good. So it's not, accurate to the person breathing, but it's pretty darn close. Right, and 7.8 billion people is a lot of people on this earth, considering all that we've been through. We'll see a couple graphs of that. Right, but I really like this website. Check it out someday if you ever want to check out the world populations. I like this one, social media. Let's see where the tweets are. I usually have my classes in the morning. It's about 9 or about noon here. So there's already been 442 million tweets sent today. 4 billion freaking Google searches, and I've done a couple of them. All right. Though I try to use that EcoAsia thing so I can plant a couple trees. But one of my favorite ones is this little thing. I always like to check it. It's always been about the same. But it's getting slow and lower. So where is it? Barrels, oil of barrels left. So they say that we have 43 years of oil left in this world. Holy guacamole! 43 years. What are we going to run our cars on? You guys are going to be, retired and have no cars to run, nowhere to go because you'll be out of gasoline because we're out of oil. Unbelievable. We'll figure that out when we get to the energy section. We'll talk about that dilemma. All right. But you can see there's a lot of different things, all the different health issues, cigarettes smoked today, about 8 million already. Money spent on illegal drugs, 321 billion this year. All right. Unbelievable. But you got to love it. 7.8 billion people in this world. And the population has to become excuse me, is becoming a topic that we need to address as a society because we already talked about some things called carrying capacity and ecological footprint. So carrying capacity is a certain areas, given areas, abilities to sustain a certain population. And if that certain population's ecological footprint, they're over harvesting stuff, means that they're not going to be able to sustain themselves, right? It's going to end up in overshoot. And believe it or not, humans have uh, a carrying capacity on this earth as well. Okay, but we got a little bit different. We're allowed to actually change things around, right? We can use some technology to become more efficient and kick a couple of animals out and allow some animals in, so we can manipulate things, but we still have to adhere to the laws of physics. There's only so much places to grow food. There's only so much clean water in certain areas, so we definitely need to watch our population count. Okay, and this subject really hit the uh, airwaves way back in the 1960s, right? Right when we were doing that environmental science movement, right? With Rachel Carson, and we got the Fresh Water Act and the EPA and the Clean Air Act. All this stuff was getting legislated. And another book that came out was called The Population Bomb. All right. And what a book this was. It was so controversial. All right. Because the first sentence in this book said, "The battle to feed humanity is over and humanity has lost." In the 1970s, the book promised hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death, no matter what people did. Nothing can prevent substantial increase in the world's death rate. Unbelievable. Nothing can be. I don't know. Are people starving? Did this come true in the future? I mean, are people starving right now? We might not see that here in America, but definitely there's a famine still going on in Yemen. All right, that is more politically motivated than anything, because believe it or not, we still, and we'll learn about this in the agriculture section, we still have enough food to feed everybody 3 square nutritious meals a day. There's no reason why anybody in this world should be hungry. None whatsoever. All right, except they don't have the resources to get to that food. Okay, but we definitely grow it. All right, so this is a hot topic about population and how do we address population growth. Okay, because nothing can grow exponentially, not our GDP, and certainly not our um, uh, population. Okay, and I don't want to tell you what to do. If you want to be K plus 8, you go right ahead. I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not going to tell you not to. All right. All I want to do is just educate you around population growth and the decisions you need to make, because you are the future. Okay, and every society goes through what's called demographic changes, which we'll learn about in the second half of this presentation. And we right now are in a very and I should say ending a very interesting time in our demographic situation of our population, and we need to. I'm kind of proud of what we're doing, to tell you the truth. And we'll learn about that um, in the second half of this presentation. So, Chapter 6, Human Population. How are we going to handle the 7.8 billion people? Okay. So, what we're going to talk about is in this lecture is the scope of the human population. We'll talk about the effects of population, its affluence and technology on its effect on its affluence and the technology on the environment. All right. We'll talk about demography and what that is and how we handle it. We'll talk about what's called demographic transitions and factors affecting population growth. Okay, so we have seen, populations grow drastically over the times, and we've seen this what's called a demographic transition. And we can help some of these third world countries that are trying to become developed like us, all right, to make it through this demographic transition of slowing down their population growth. Okay, but there's a lot of ways to control population, and one of a case study in the world is China's two-child policy. China's new two-child policy diffuse its population time bomb. All right, so you're saying two-child policy. What's that mean? I thought they only had one-child policy. Well, they actually changed it. All right, so and they got in trouble because of it. All right, we're going to learn that in just a second. So in 1970, China instituted a population control program that restricted most couples to one single child. So this wasn't all nationwide for China. It was basically in the major cities. All right, if you're still out there in rural areas with in the country of China out there in the sticks, they didn't really enforce this as a single child problem. It was basically in the crowded cities, okay, because they're cities. I mean, they have 10 million plus in cities like New York. I mean, their cities are huge. They dwarf our cities, okay, and they needed to do something about it. And they instituted a one-child policy. And no one was, I don't think anybody was put to death. But they were fined heavily if you did have an extra child. Okay. Efforts included to increase accessibility to contraception. They wanted to do this rationally. Okay, like I said, they weren't going around killing everybody. They were just trying to mitigate their population growth, and they put in good efforts. Okay, to increase accessibility to contraceptives, abortion, rewards for single child families. So you get a nice little tax break and some extra money for just having one kid. And then if you had more than one kid, you had fines. Okay, and then society was also uh, trained to scorn you. You looked bad if you had more than one child because you were going against the national interest, and you were just serving your self-interest in a sense. That's how they were kind of treating it. Okay, and they still kind of treat it that way because China knows it has a population problem with 1.3 billion people. I mean, that's a billion more people, and try to get all those people out of poverty. It's tough. And they actually did it. Okay. And one of the ways they did it was to drop the fertility rates. All right. So the fertility rate dropped from 5.8 kids per woman, all right, to 1.6 childs per woman. That is a dramatic decrease from 1970 to today. I mean, that is an unbelievable from 6 to 2. Okay. That is success. You might not like the approach they took, but this definitely did work for China. All right, the percentage growth rate went from 2.8% to 0.5%. So it's actually went into almost what's called a negative growth rate because this is not replacement rate. Replacement rate would be 2%. All right, so they were just a little bit of a replacement rate, meaning they were adding more people. Okay, here at 0.5, they're actually subtracting more people because you need 2 kids to keep people equal. If you think about it, right? That is just replacement rate. That's zero population. Every family has 2 kids, and you replace each other, right? And it went down to 0.5. Unbelievable. Okay, so they're actually at a negative growth rate. So this one-child policy created problems, though. The population's labor force shrank. Okay, because you typically in a society, the younger working people are taking care of both the older and the younger generation. All right, so when that shrinks, that means there's less people being able to take care of the older generations and the younger generations. The percentage of elderly increased, and there were too few women. All right, because believe it or not, in China, in China and most developing nations, the male, of course, makes the most money. I don't mean to say that facetiously. That's just the way society has been. So what they would do is, if they found out that they were going to have a girl, they would have an abortion. All right. And they didn't want to have that. They only wanted to have boys so that they could generate more income and have a better opportunity to be taken care of when they're older. All right. The decrease in younger workers made it difficult for employers and may affect the economy. The cultural increased value of male children combined with one-child policy led to selective abortions, like I said. And male to female ratio is unbalanced. There's a lot of guys, creating a large number of young men who cannot marry. And make them a little irritated. But what really gets me, though, is, I don't see any studies of this, but I wonder what it would be like to study a whole generation that were only childs, right? Not that being an only child is a bad thing, right? But we know that there are some differences between children who have siblings and children that don't. Okay, now we have a whole generation in China that were single childs, only children. So I wonder what that would look like. I don't know. I've never seen a study on it, but it sure will be kind of interesting. All right, but you can see how the shift in China's age is going to be. All right, so we have the 60 to 8, over 60s up here in the gray, and then 15 to working age, all right, in the green, and then younger age in the blue. And you can see how that's shifting, how we're getting less people able to work to take care of the gray and the blue. Okay. So the population time bomb of the aging population is skewed male to female ratio and has led Chinese to change its policies from that single child policy. All right. So in 2013, if either member of a married couple was the only child, they were now allowed. Then that couple was granted permission to have 2 children. And then in 2015, the one child policy was immediately altered to make it 2 children policy because the demographics over time started changing. And when those demographics changed, the age ratio and the sex ratio and the age ratio changed the economy of China as well, right? And the future impacts are basically unclear of what's really going to happen. They're going to have to try very hard because no countries are starting to just go through this kind of stuff. So it's unclear how many Chinese couples or who are now used to be greater wealth in urban lifestyles will decide to grow their families. So um, we'll learn about this in the demographic change in the second part. But after a while, after a country becomes developed, the need for children actually decreases, all right, or the wanting of children decreases. They don't need to have 7 kids and hope that 2 make it now, all right, and we'll discuss that in the second part of this presentation. So China is not the only country with population issues. India lacks similar stringent policies and will soon become the most populous country. All right. So they currently have about 7.2 billion. So they're only about 100 million away from breaking India. So they say in 2025, India should cross over to China, and they're going to keep on going up because India has not issued the one-child policy or anything like that. You can see how India's reproductive rates are coming down. All right, population in billions is coming down here. Expected to actually decrease by 2050. Well, India is supposed to be increasing by 2050, and the world is increasing the same at all over. Okay, so the current world population is about 7.4 billion of writing of this, and what we say it was 7.8 billion. So there's 200 billion more people since this slide came out. All right. That's a lot of people. And a lot of that growing populations are occurring in the poorer nations, all right? And this is due to some what's called demographic transitions, which we'll talk about in the second part of this presentation. So human population is currently growing at about a rate of 88 million per year, or that is about 2.8 people added every single second. Okay, the human population did not reach a billion until after 1800. So it was until 1800 where we had less than a billion humans. All right, a billion people are currently being added every 12 years. All right, and that's exactly right. All right, because when I started teaching, it was about 12 years ago, and we had about 6.8 billion people on this planet, and now we have 7.8 billion people. So the rate of increase of population increase in the world has stayed relatively constant. All right. And we're getting into what's called the laws of large numbers. All right. 2.5% of a billion people is a lot more than 2.5% of a million people, but it's still 2.5%. So this is an example of exponential growth. The human population is an example of exponential growth, where the small percentage growth rate still produce a large increase due to its size and population base. So once again, if we look around and we see what's called J curve forming here in the population, okay. So way back when, I remember when we did the first chapter, everybody said that the population booms because of the agricultural section. I don't know if I really agree with that because you can see it was kind of basically flat, all right. And they definitely had more food and more, or they, I don't know if they During the agricultural revolution, the hunter and gatherers were still well fed. Okay, they didn't lack for food. The problem was they had to work for that food, and it was a lot more dangerous. Okay, and then when we started the agricultural revolution, we were able to do what's called the division of labor. People were able to settle down and didn't have to work for their food. They can go work for something, and we started using money and trade and stuff like that. So civilization sprung up. But they were still confined to a a large population growth. I mean, it might have grew a little bit, all right, but all things considered, it leveled out because we still had the carrying capacity. Not to worry about. We didn't have the technology back then to overcome um, some of those problems that arise with a large population. And you can see here that lo and behold, what has happened is we have a J curve, and right here is 2000 is the 20th century, the Industrial Revolution, and that is what exactly has instituted the population boom, the Industrial Revolution. And it's not just the Industrial Revolution of being able to burn coal. We were able to burn coal and oil and all that other stuff and other machinery to make our lives a lot better. But people started living longer because we had some medical advances. Okay, so people weren't dying all of a sudden. Okay, or dying at the age of 30. Okay, because back before the Industrial Revolution, the life expectancy of an American was like 50, 60 years old. Okay, and today it's 76 to 80 years old. Okay, so people are living a lot longer. We have medical advances, all of this stuff, and that just allowed the population to just totally take off and boom. All right, to the point where we are now. And whenever I see a J curve, I can't say that J curves are bad because I like my J curves. I like, especially in my financial portfolio. I like when I see my stock market investments go like this. That's always a good thing, all right? But I get scared because I know that these J curves are not something that is sustainable, all right? Because we have a carrying capacity here on this earth, and sooner or later, this J curve, just like Mother Nature does with everything else, has to turn it into an S curve, all right? And stay up here on top of the carrying capacity of this one Earth. And in my humble opinion, we are at that time at 7.8 billion people. I mean, we might be able to get up to 8, 9, maybe 10, possibly even 13. But this needs to be starting to turn out to an S curve. And that's part of what the Sustainable Development Goals are all about. Trying to turn this population growth curve into that S curve that Mother Nature will force us into. Okay, we can either do it ourselves or we can wait until Mother Nature does something like give us all a new disease that we haven't seen before and kill us all off, or some of us off. Okay, just like the Black Plague, right? So those things happen all the time in societies when they're overpopulated. Okay, if we don't fix it, Mother Nature will. So the doubling time of a country's population can be estimated by the rule of 70, which we learned way back when in the video, the most important video you ever seen. All right. So the global doubling time is 70 times 1/2. So in 58 years, we're going to have 14.6 billion people, or 15.6 billion people. I don't know if that's even possible, right? China's doubling time prior to the one child policy was 25 years. But now, since they changed stuff, it is 140 years. All right, so they're buying themselves a little bit of time to be able to not double like that. Okay, and you can see the population growth rates all over America. So less than zero is negative. So in Greenland and most of Europe, you see that they have a negative growth rate. Okay, in America, we are 0.0 to 0.57. So we are 0.76 to 1.5. Okay, right in here. So we can track all these, and the red ones are a lot more than 3%. So these poorer countries that you see are definitely the highest population growth rates, and the people that need the most help figuring these things out. Okay. But that's what we're here for. We're here to try to help people out and um, make sure that we address this as mature adults. So our population growth is largely due to technology, agriculture, sanitation advances that reduce these death rates. I mean, I love the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution saved a lot of lives. I mean, I would not be here talking to you if it wasn't for the Industrial Revolution. Okay, I literally have a spine of steel, and I got titanium in my back. Right, I got a foot made of carbon fiber, right, because I was in an accident. Okay, so, I'm really grateful for all these technology advances. But sometimes we need to say, you know, uh, can we keep on growing our population like this? All right. We got to, we have all the smarts to make all this technology. Do we have the smarts to live with inside the means of the earth? All right. Thomas Mathis argued this a long time ago. The number of people would eventually outgrow the available food supply. All right. He said it long before Paul Ehrlich did with his population bomb book. All right. And Mathis, didn't have the hindsight of all this technology. All right. But even way back when, people were wondering, would we be able to um, meet the needs of the future generations? Will there be enough food and fresh water for these future generations to be able to grow? And Mathis and Urich both said that if we didn't address the issue, we will outstrip our food supply, and I think that's a rational thing to say, in my humble opinion. So, despite the quadrupling of the human population, these predictions have not fully materialized. All right, because the food production is intensified as a result of what they call the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution is not solar panels and wind turbines. The Green Revolution was about us being able to produce more agricultural products, and we'll talk about that in the agricultural section. All right. But you see, the key word hasn't fully materialized. Just because we don't see him here in our nation, there's other nations that are suffering. All right, Mozambique right here. I think this is Yemen area. All right, I know Yemen. So I think this is Yemen. All right, I'm not too sure what this is. Okay, but there's a lot of areas that have large populations, and there's a lot of suffering and people that aren't able to eat. All right, look at Afghanistan. Okay, so Paul and no, what am I doing? So, despite these improvements, population still depletes resources, stresses out social systems, and degrades the national environment. So, we have all these, we're able to feed every single person if we wanted to. We have all these technical advantages to do all these great things. But regardless, we still deplete resources. So, we learned about the ecological footprint, all right? And that ecological footprint is basically a takeoff of this equation from Paul Ehrlich. Okay, it's called the IPAT model, and it represents our total impact. Right, is I on the environment, and that's a result of human population. Okay, the affluency of that population, and the technology that population has. Okay. So if you just think about this logically, an increased population means more individuals take up more space, use more resources, and generate more waste, right? So of course, the higher the population, the more resources are going to be needed for that population. The affluence leads to greater per capita resource consumption. So affluence is something, or the power an individual has, or how much money that individual has. All right, that is what's called affluence. So if you have a lot of affluence, you have a lot of power and ability to do a lot of unique stuff per se. Okay, and technology. So technology can increase impact by enhancing our ability to exploit resources and decrease impact of improving efficiencies. So if we have the advanced technologies, we are able to actually live a little bit better lives. Okay, But sometimes when we live those better lives, we were actually uh, harming the environment a little bit more. Each one of those cell phones, each one of those computers has to have some heavy metals and some uh, crazy mining of copper and gold and um, lithium and all these different things inside that computer to make it tick. All right. And if we didn't have the money to spend, that stuff would never be extracted and the environmental damage would never happen. Okay. So, demography. Demography is the principles of population ecology and can be applied to the study of statistical changes in the human population. We call this demography, right? So, demography is a bunch of stats about population norms and um, uh, how many women and how many men, how big is the population, how many kids, all these different things. All right, and it's called demography. And demographers study several characteristics of human population. We'll look at the size, the distribution, the age structure of that society, um, the sex ratio, how many male to female, all right, rates of births, deaths, immigration and immigration. So you can see all these things are just basic stuff that we need to know when we're deciding how big or what to do with our populations. Current population size, like I said, is about, here it says 7.3, but it's about 7.8 right now, spreading among 200 different nations. And the United Nations predicts by about 2050, we will surpass 9.7 billion people, and we are well on our way to get to that 9.7 billion people. Many other demographic aspects determine environmental impacts besides just size. All right. So when we look here into this little graph, we can see that India has 1.3 billion people, China 1.2, and the other nations 3.8. So, these two definitely are the biggest nations out there. All right. And we are just 5%. So we have 324 million people here in the United States, 5% of the world's population. But we use our affluence allows us to use 25% of the world's resources. Okay. And that's because we are a affluent nation. We have the money to get these things and live high on the hog per se. So you can also see here in Figure 6, the United Nations predicted world population goes. So if we keep on the same trajectory that we're going right now, all right, we'll get to that 16 billion by 211. All right, so here's that 9.8 billion. Hopefully, what the UN goals, all right, the Sustainable Development Goals that we saw on the last chapter, we want to try to bend this curve. That's what we're working on. Is trying to burn that J curve, bend it over into an S curve. Okay, and try to keep the median fertility rate going. All right, but hopefully we're going to have a lower fertility rate and maybe even bring down the population. This will be, in my humble opinion, the best case scenario. But we need to do it civil because people need to be able to do what they want to do, have as many kids as they want. I mean, who's to tell you? I don't like that one child policy. I'd rather just educate and empower women, and that works just as well. We'll talk about that later, though. So age structure diagrams are also called population pyramids and describe relative number of individuals of each age class within a population. And this is valuable for predicting future growth of a population. So we can see here in this uh, little age population pyramid, all right, this population pyramid, you can see here that the younger kids are basically the base, right? There's a lot more younger kids down here, and then they have the working age, and then all these people up here for the older, right? So a lot of young, middle class or middle age, working age, and then older population over 40, over 50, 45, I guess. And here you see a population that's stable, all right? So you got just as many on outside of these categories. You have just as many young people as there are working people as there are old people. But what we're seeing a lot more in society is this pyramid showing up, where we have a lot more older people, a lot less working age taking care of those older people, and a lot less younger people. Okay, because these working people aren't having 3 to 4 kids. They're only having their 2.2 kids or what have you. And we see this happening. This is what's happening in China, but it's also happening here in the United States. The baby boomer generation is now a little bit of a overextension, a little bit of ballooning on society, and it's going to be dragging down on our economy. We'll make it, of course. All right, we'll be able to do what we need to do and get by there, but we need to address the situation because we have this thing called Social Security and Medicare that we need to be able to pay for. Okay, and we started addressing it back in the 70s with Ronald Reagan. So we definitely are trying to address this situation. How we want to address it, that's going to be up to us and up to the future generations of voters. Okay, so a pyramid with a Y base, like I said, denotes a large population of pre-reproductive age. Pyramid with an even is a stable population, and the pyramid with a high proportion is a post-reproductive age. Adults indicates a shrinking population. Okay. And if we look at two real life examples, we see here is Canada. Right. And Canada seems kind of stable. All right. They have even number of children, working adults, and older generations. All right. But when you look here with Nigeria, holy guacamole, look at all these kids. They have a huge population increase, okay? They're having 5.6% growth rate, all right? And there's a lot of kids down here. Not too many working people, but hardly anybody over the age of 40 or 45, I guess. That's what this is, all right? But that's sad because Nigeria's expected life expectancy, all right, is like 45, all right, because of the AIDS epidemic that's happening in that nation, all right. So people are dying. I mean, it used to be like 70. Now it's 45 because people were dying because of AIDS, believe it or not, all right. And a lot of times these children are born with AIDS to begin with, so they'll never have a chance to get up here. Hopefully, science will find a way around, and we're doing a lot better with the AIDS thing. All right, but that's what's happened with this society. All right, they have no older folks because they're not living longer lives. Their lives are actually being shortened. Okay. Demography is a study of human population. So the global population is older than in the past years. The median age today is 28. In 2050, it's predicted to be about 35. This creates a strain on social welfare programs in some countries because as younger workers are supporting the elderly and also the young. All right, so we have what's called a double diaper dilemma. All right, which some people call it double diaper dilemma, which I call it double diaper dilemma. All right, and that's just about how my sister had this problem. She was had 2 young kids in 3 young kids, 4 young kids in school. All right, and she was there and had to actually take care of my grandma as well, who was suffering from Alzheimer's. So she actually had 2 diapers to change. She had to change my grandma's diaper and change her kid's diaper. All right, and the double diaper dilemma. So you can see how this workforce generation has to take care of both the old and the young. And with this shrinking and this getting bigger, all right, it's harder to do. So the naturally occurring sex ratio in the birth for a human population is 106 males per every 100 females. We don't really know why this is, but this is kind of like the natural ratio. And this is likely an evolutionary adaptation to increase the mortality rate faced by males, right? Because us guys, we do crazy stuff and get in accidents and have to have a metal put in our back and lose their leg and have a graphite foot, So we're crazy like that. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just all luck. Maybe someday that will change. Okay. But when you look at China, the age distribution has become increasingly skewed. When the male to female ratio has become recently skewed. So there's 116 Chinese boys born for every 100 girls. All right. So their ratio 106 to 100. They're 116 to 100 in China. That's unbelievable. But that's more or less picking and choosing and not a natural phenomenon. Right? The leading hypothesis is that many parents are using ultrasound to determine the gender of the unborn fetus and then selectively avoiding the females because they want to have a male to help increase the income of the family. Okay? And hopefully this kind of thing will change um, with the two-child policy now implemented by China. All right, so let us stop right there and get back into it because this is about halfway through the population section. Next, we're going to talk about the societal changes, the shifts in society as they transition, and demographic shifts as they transition through going from underdeveloped to developed. Right. So don't forget, everybody, your test is due by tomorrow by midnight. So get it on up there and have a nice day. If you guys have any questions, just give me a shout out. Thanks. Bye bye.